climate change doesn't happen everywhere in the same way.
Yeah.
Dubai got green. The desert, which was plain sand a few years ago, is a meadow. Climate in the moment is developing in a way natural environment would be deadly. Which country installed the most solar energy last year? Of course, China. And there are satellite pictures where you can see a big gray cloud, and it's so much that it helps to reduce greenhouse effect. So what happened in China is their emissions from the coal power were so large that they actually reduced the global temperature by creating a reflecting cloud cover. When you clean that up, the temperatures will rise.
What does China say about it?
They know that. But they understood if they continue to pollute the environment in the way they are doing now, they're going to die. Up to 90% of the electric energy can be converted into chemical energy already with the latest technology. So just to cover that demand will take out a huge percentage of greenhouse gases produced now. So we are not stuck because of lack of technology. We don't have the factories to produce the machines.
Tobias, thank you for joining me. How are you, sir?
Thank you.
Tobias, tell me a bit about you. Tell me a bit about Tobias. How did you get to where you are right now?
So I came here just before COVID.
Okay.
I had a big research program in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
And I was flying so often from Germany to Saudi Arabia that in the end, the stewardess welcomed me at the entrance of the airport. So nice to see you again, Mr. Koch. And when I came back, sometimes my small son opened the door and said, Opa is back again. So I thought I'd doing something wrong. So I decided to move with the family to Dubai.
Nice.
But in order to be closer to Saudi Arabia on day trip distance, I flew a single time to Saudi Arabia and COVID struck. I was stuck here. And I never left.
Listen, it happens to the best of us. I mean, there's worse place to be stuck.
Of course.
You know what I mean?
I had a great time during Corona. I liked it.
I was actually a big fan of it. I know we're not allowed to say it was a terrible time for the world, but I actually really enjoyed it.
Me, personally, I was fine.
Anyhow, people might disagree. So you've been working for 25 years. What fascinates you so much?
Yeah, so how can I been stuck for 25 years with the same thing? You come from school, you think you can change the world. And I had my tries. I went to Russia, I worked for humanitarian aid, I tried to become a journalist, I worked for energy efficiency, and then suddenly I found something.
Okay.
And that was called at that time emission trading.
Right.
Wow, a new concept. And I know exactly the moment when that happened. That was in Washington, D.C. in the year 1995.
Okay.
And it was a special day off at the World Bank. I was an intern at the World Bank.
Right, very good.
And there was one day where all employees of the World Bank got a day off. And through all the buildings of the World Bank in Washington, they invited the most famous economists.
Right.
And we had a huge program of interesting presentations on something new, something relevant for the work of the World Bank. And I got into an introduction to emission trading.
Okay.
And I found it so fascinating.
Straight away.
I was catched. And I knew that's something I want to develop. That's interesting. And at that time, I worked a lot in Russia.
Yeah.
And there was never money for any energy efficiency measures. So people continued to fire the coal and the gas.
Yeah.
Because they had zero money to invest to make any improvements.
Okay.
And I discovered this possibility. Oh, you actually can get paid for doing good?
So when you realized your fascination for it, did you decide I'm going to go into it regardless of getting paid for it or not? Or did you go into it thinking I can get paid for this?
Okay, I had a very privileged situation.
Yeah.
We were selling the house of my grandpa.
Okay.
And my share of the money I invested in Samsung Electronics shares.
Right.
I made 2,000% profit.
Nice.
So I was free. I had the privilege not to earn money for 10 years.
Right. Okay. So that was your thinking. You were like, I'm good.
I invested that in total. Traveling and education and, let's say, working free of charge.
Yeah.
For a period of 10 years.
Okay.
That got me where I'm now somehow.
So that experience, that freedom,
I had the economic freedom for 10 years to invest in my personal education and career.
And then you had, would you say it was a goal back then? Like you were like, I'm going to pursue this, or were you kind of open to other avenues, or were you like focused on that?
I changed my focus, but always after several years of trying.
Yeah.
So my first target was that I really wanted to continue to work for the UN system.
Okay.
And I tried hard.
Yeah.
And I did different internships at the World Bank, at the UNFCCC. I took part in all the UN conferences on climate change. And I got never paid.
Yeah.
So I always had to cover my cost.
Interesting. So like it was pure voluntary basis.
That was pure voluntary basis.
Right.
Yeah. So I was a fanatic. You can call that. Yeah. I was a believer.
Yeah. Was there at any point were you like, nah, this is just, did you ever feel I'm done? This is like, I'm wasting my time here.
That happened many times,
really?
Actually. Because that was always up and down.
Yeah.
So in the beginning, it was fantastic. So 1999, early 2000s, we thought we have found the future of the world economy.
Yeah.
Like in Star Trek, the resource credits.
Okay.
No more money. You count in resource credits, ultimative currency.
Yeah.
And we were very close on getting that. So, and there were not so many experts in that field.
Yeah.
So in Russia, I was like number 3. And there were nobody else.
Wow.
So wherever you got, you could tell people a good story. So you open their mind that they found new possibilities which I never ever heard before.
Yeah.
That was a pre-internet age.
Wow.
You hardly got an internet connection in Russia at that time. You had to dial up with So it was pretty something.
Yeah.
And
exciting.
And it was very exciting. You got into the news easily. That was a time when I also did a lot of interviews and I wrote a lot of newspaper articles. I made tons of international publications and it was always new.
Yeah.
It was always exciting and we were fighting to reach the target. And it was a great community. So I still have many friends which I learned to know 20 years ago at the UN.
Yeah. Still to this day, they're still
until today.
Really?
Yes.
Would you, looking back, would you do it all over again?
Now my wife would say, yeah, you learn to know me and you have fantastic children and a lot of money. Yeah, though, what do you regret? It was hard at length. So, of course, I would have wished that we would be successful already in the year 2000.
Yeah.
But then came W. Bush and had other ideas about my future plans.
Yeah.
So always it was like up and down. So I prepared something, worked into a field, get up, made a career. Boom. Somebody in Washington, somebody in Moscow, somebody at European Community had a different idea of what my future should be. So
adapt and overcome them.
You had to be adaptable and resourceful, and I completely understand that I had a privilege that I didn't need to earn money for the next day.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to do that. Yeah.
It's interesting. Talk to me about your latest project. Now that you're here, what is your latest project?
The latest project is in Saudi Arabia.
Okay.
And why we are here, project finance with emission trading is now possible again.
Okay.
We had like a 10 years interruption between the Kyoto Protocol and the Paris Agreement.
Okay.
So where these funny names come from. So the UN always names the agreement after the city where the agreement was found.
Yeah.
So the Kyoto Protocol was an emission trading system from 2008 to 2012, decided in Kyoto. Now we are working with the Paris Agreement, named after the conference in Paris. That was already 5 years ago.
Right.
But yeah. Now the new age of emission trading started.
Okay.
Exactly this year. Not many people know about it. It's still new. But we have a new international established emission trading system. And now it's possible again to create emission rights sanctioned by the UN.
Okay. When you say this agreement was back 5 years ago, did COVID stop the agreement? Is that why it's only getting going now, or it's just 5 years because it's 5 years?
COVID cost just 1 year, and on the big view of things, that doesn't change much.
Yeah.
The UN is very slowly.
Okay.
That is a big disadvantage. But that's the art of finding agreement with 170 nations, which all have their individual interests and plus sometimes even the interests of the delegates.
Yes. So 5 years is kind of when...
5 years, super fast at the UN. Yeah.
So basically, you're getting paid to reduce CO2 emissions. Is that correct?
So it's not so simple because there's not the UN having the money and paying it out.
Right.
You need to convince a project.
Okay.
So you have the idea how to reduce emissions. That can be energy efficiency, avoidance of methane emissions, building renewable power which has zero emissions, or even carbon capture.
Okay.
So once you have that idea, you need to formulate it properly. And the art is called finding the baseline and finding the additionality.
Right.
So the baseline is actually a what if scenario. So what if nothing happens?
Right.
What would be?
Yeah.
What is the most likely course of action in the future without any influence from emission trading?
Right.
Usually, the machines which are working continue to work because nobody likes to spend money for nothing.
Yeah.
So, in case of our water management, water systems, this is huge investments. They are really expensive.
What are we talking, Nick? Well, give me an example for an average. Okay, not average is probably different. What is Saudi paying?
The Saudis pay nearly nothing because that's the social contract.
Right.
So the individual citizen doesn't pay much for water and doesn't pay much for electricity.
Yeah.
Because that's the social contract with the kingdom, that the king takes the oil and provides all the services to the people.
Right. Okay.
So we in this society, we have the specific problem of very low prices for water and electricity for the consumer.
Yeah.
So they don't really have an incentive to reduce consumption.
Right.
And that makes it actually very interesting for emission trading, carbon credits, because those are a different source of income besides the reduction of the cost for energy.
Yeah.
So what is the cost? A water management system for a city like Riyadh? Billions. You can change that easily. It's built infrastructure.
Okay.
Where you can make a change is in the fine-tuning. So at the end, in the sewage plant, the most important process is the enrichment of the sewage with oxygen.
Right.
So the bacteria can live and eat up the dirt.
Right.
In the past, this was done by propellers.
Right.
And they were splashing in the water and turning and...
When you say past, how like, what, 10, 15, 20
that
years
is
ago?
state of the art until today.
Oh, okay.
Most countries have exactly this system, And until a few years ago, everybody would do it like that.
Right. That was the norm.
That was just the norm.
That was
and
how you did
all the plants in the United States and Europe are done with this technology. That's why it's always around basin, yeah?
Yeah.
Because the propellers were turning and mixing the water.
Right. Okay. So that's okay.
That is very energy intensive. All these sewage treatment plants consume enormous amounts of electricity. One way to reduce that is to use mats made from special membranes.
Okay.
And instead of shoveling the air into the water from the top, you bring the air in from the bottom.
Okay.
And then it bubbles up. So when you have your goldfish in the aquarium, very often you have an air pump and you have a stone, and out of the stone bubbles the air. Imagine that covering the whole floor of the aquarium.
Okay.
And the bubbles are not half a centimeter big, but very, very small, millimeters size. And it becomes like a cloud. And you enrich the water in a way with oxygen that the bacteria have the optimal growth conditions, and all the waste material is permanently mixed in the whole basin, not only on the top.
Right.
So if you do that change to the next generation of technology, you easily can save 30-40% of electricity.
But that seems like an absolute... So as we were saying before, so the propellers have been the old way since before. Where did this new technology suddenly come? Where did someone suddenly go, you know what, let's do this technology? Like, where did this come from, this technology? Or is it just now that people can afford the technology now, or people are willing to try the technology? Is there other technology that is available that could be even better than this, but it's just money?
Better doesn't mean that somebody is taking it.
Right.
Because we're talking about government-owned, half-government-owned infrastructure.
Okay.
So even if you know what to do better, do you get a budget? Whom are you going to ask for a budget? The stuff you're working with is actually working well.
Yeah. Okay.
The electricity is subsidized. You're using.
Yeah.
Why change? Change is risk.
Yeah, but would it not be... I always think the likes of Saudi and the Middle East and UAE, I know it's risk, but the forward-thinking mentality, and they have the budget. To them, it's not so much... in Europe, we know that it's you have unions and parliament and governments that get in the way of all this kind of stuff.
And here you have a very interesting mix of government-owned infrastructure and private operators.
Right, okay.
And who got an interest in changing anything? The operator is paid.
They're still paid.
And is paid regardless of how much energy you consume, because the energy sometimes is paid by the government.
Right, okay.
You're just stuffing the plant.
Yeah.
So there's no incentive for anybody to do something.
Okay.
So what we can help now is we can generate the capital necessary for the upgrade of the infrastructure by means of emission trading.
Okay.
And then it makes a real difference.
The difference is, though, I was wondering, is this was going to sound, I wouldn't say lazy as a consumer, but why bother? Why should we reduce? As a person here, how would you convince me?
Yeah, we're here in Dubai, and it's famous for the big cars and the Lamborghinis and the golden steaks, yeah?
Go to big water parks and the big pools and the shack, why?
Yeah, and the big aircrafts and the big yachts.
Everything.
Yeah.
Everything's bigger and better.
Yes. Why should you care?
Yeah.
How can you live in Dubai? Can you eat money like the Indians were asking in America? Can you eat the money? Yeah, you can't eat the money. You need water. You need food. And here comes now something else into play. You need a climate you're able to live in.
Yeah.
Imagine the climate in the Emirates getting another 3-4 degrees hotter. What will happen? is it still possible to live here? Or it's just enough to have more air conditioning, yeah? Well, let's say it's not going to be nicer.
Okay.
And at some point, the disadvantages are too big. And the caravan will move further to more interesting conditions, to Iceland, Sweden, Norway, yeah?
Yeah.
Because it's getting too uncomfortable here.
But
So-
what's the turning point? Like how close are we to that now, or how far away are we? Like
Actually, climate change here can be really dangerous. It happened that climate change doesn't happen everywhere in the same way.
yeah.
There's areas which can get even cooler, other areas get more rain, and not only in the Sahara it's going to be hotter. Actually, the contrary is happening. The Sahara is getting greener.
Okay.
And even if you look out of the door, we already discussed that Dubai got green.
Yeah. Yeah.
The desert, which was plain sand a few years ago, is a meadow. At least during the winter,
Yeah.
it's green. And who doesn't know Dubai wouldn't believe it, that actually it looks like in our savannah. You're just missing the zebras and elephants.
I'm sure they can get them in.
And then that happened in the last 5 years.
yeah.
So fantastic. But it can happen also in the other direction. If it's getting hotter here, the days where you actually would die when you are without protection on the outside increase. So it's a mixture of temperature and humidity which can kill you. And the climate in the moment is developing in a way that actually the natural environment would be deadly for a large part of the year. And that's not nice.
No. But how worried should we be? Like, because you work with the technology, you see the forecast, you see the situation probably more than anyone else. I'm oblivious to it, my own ignorance. But from your side, do you go, oh, my kids, I'm doing this because I know that when my kids come around, their situation might be different. Is it that close, or are we talking 100 years, 200 years, or?
We are talking for the next 30, 50 years.
Okay.
So this is around the corner.
Right.
It was around the corner already in the year 2000, and everybody knew. So nothing which happens now with all the heat waves and the flooding is a surprise.
Yeah.
Actually, our climate behaves like the forecast. I'm really astonished that it came true in my lifetime.
Okay.
So when we were discussing it in the late 90s, yeah, it's getting hot and we're having overflooding regular. I come from Germany, so I never had in my youth any flood event.
Okay.
Unheard of. In the history books, maybe.
Yeah.
And okay, we built dams, we regulated the rivers. This is never to happen again. And now it's every second year. And people are wondering, how can it hit us? Because they're not used anymore to any natural catastrophe.
Do you think people are I don't know, humans, we just kind of just get used to the situation, which could be good or bad. It's kind of like, it's getting warmer, so it's getting warmer.
That is with the famous experiment with the frog when you turn on the heating and the water slowly starts boiling and the frog doesn't jump out until he's fried.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's exactly like this. People get used and they don't they don't see the change. Well, I'm already now an old guy, yeah? So I can remember that I built an igloo in front of my house. My children built a single time a snowman.
So it's changed. You can see the change.
Yeah.
You can see the change.
It changed a lot.
Yeah.
Even in Germany. And actually, what we got now, this is climate of northern Italy.
Okay.
And northern Italy got the climate of southern Italy. And southern Italy got the climate of northern Africa.
Yeah.
And that happened in half a lifetime.
But you believe it's possible to change it, or for us to adapt? What way are we going? Are we going to... We can't change it now, so we're going to have to adapt, or we can change it?
We are now too late to avoid climate change.
It's
That's
done.
given.
Okay.
The train left the station.
Right.
So we have to get used to live in a world which is hotter, where the weather is not so foreseeable as it used to be,
Yeah.
where we'll have constraints. 1 year the harvest will be good and the other it will be lost. So the comfort zone is getting smaller. And we have to live with catastrophes. We have to live with heat waves. We have to live with burning forests in places the forest never burned before. That's the new normal.
But you said yourself you knew this 25 years ago.
Yeah. Nobody can, by the way, say, oh, it's a surprise.
Yeah.
We knew. Everybody who wanted to know knew. And it was forecasted by the science.
So what went wrong? So if we knew 25 years ago all this and we're here now, what's stopping what we're being told now in 25 years? Like,
what is a term for a politician?
oh, well,
4 years?
4 years, yeah.
5? Yeah. Probably twice 4 years.
Right.
We were talking about stuff that starts at the earliest 30 years further.
Yeah.
So what these guys did, even in the good old times when everybody found an agreement in Kyoto Protocol, they decided on a mechanism that would start 20 years later. Okay, anybody of these guys who made the decisions was either in pension or dead.
Yeah.
Nobody was facing the consequences. So now you understand why it sometimes takes so long at the UN, because actually nobody liked to make a decision that could come back to them.
Okay.
Which could be inconvenient, where they would tell the voters or the pressure groups to do something which was inconvenient. Yeah, well, that's why the decisions were always something is going to start 10 years later. And okay, we found an agreement, in 10 years we'll start doing something.
Is that financial as well? Is it kind of a case of, do you know what, this is only costing me X amount now, I'm good. I won't be here in 20 years or 30 years or 40 years.
Exactly.
Right.
So it was a mixture of, yes, we did our duty. We decided to start doing something in 10 years. And in the moment, we're keeping our money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is
the most convenient thing you can do.
And money is king, unfortunately. It's
Yeah, that's what many people did not understand 20 years ago.
Yeah.
That actually saving energy, reducing emissions can be profitable. And we are now in a very nice situation. We have sources of energy which are carbon free, carbon neutral, which are actually cheaper than gas and coal.
right.
30 years ago, you didn't have that. 30 years ago, photovoltaics was space technology. Perverse expensive.
Yeah.
And of course, even myself, I thought, why, what are these guys talking about? Solar energy? Invest some money in landfill gas destruction, make styrofoam on the wall, reduce the heating load. But photovoltaics? Ugh. Waste of time, yeah? And now, fantastic.
Yeah.
The progress is really extraordinary.
Yeah.
Nobody could have forecasted the low prices of photovoltaics we have today. And this is, of course, a game changer. And there's now many other possibilities where you could throw away the equipment you have, buy a new one, and immediately make a profit.
Straight away. From your experience, do you see the technology is much more, each year is getting better and better and better and better and quicker and quicker and quicker, where it might reverse the situation? Or is it a case of now damage limitations?
Yeah, well, it's a damage limitations, of course.
Yeah.
A lot of damage is already done. And even if we stop emitting anything today, it will take hundreds of years to go back to normal.
Right.
That's given. And
okay.
It's very difficult to change something about that. So you could go into planetary weather engineering and try to seed the oceans with minerals. Yeah, try that and see what happens.
Yeah.
And you have one time to try only. Second try is everything is dead. So that's the geoengineering is going to be an option. We should not say that this never should happen.
Is it being looked into now, though? Do you know if it's...
Yeah.
Like,
There's a lot of people looking into that, but it got a stigma. And the stigma is that it's probably a false hope.
Okay.
And it should not be used as an excuse to do nothing. Because nobody knows whether humankind is clever enough to do geoengineering. We should be clever enough to stop doing the shit we are doing.
Yeah. But history tells us so far.
Shit has to happen in order for somebody to start to clean up.
Yeah.
And hopefully, we are now already so far, before millions have to die, that now it's a conscious that actually climate change is happening.
Yeah.
20 years ago, we had a lot of pressure groups paid by big companies trying to convince the public that climate change is not real, or it's the sun and it's a cycle of,
it was like,
the Earth turning around
but
the
like
sun.
Al Gore was going for president.
All that
It
stuff,
was kind of like he was very a big campaigner, and then he got smeared with that kind of like hocus pocus.
This was a really paid campaign, and we know who that was.
Because I remember, like when he got, it was the first kind of smear campaign you saw against someone but his ideas was good. Do you know what I mean? He wasn't saying nothing bad, but he was made out to be the kind of the voodoo and this hocus pocus, and it's all like...
Yeah, and that's himself saying later that he could not bring forward everything he knew at that time.
Yeah.
Because there was public pressure of not complying with climate change, of not turning off the coal power stations, not making the oil workers unemployed.
Yeah.
And of course, abolish the gas guzzlers and everybody goes by microcars and that was not popular.
Yeah.
That didn't go well, and you wouldn't win an election with that.
You weren't going to get the American, Joe Bloggs sitting in Alabama turning off his truck.
Change the hamburger to sauerkraut and all that. Yeah,
he was
impossible.
1 year ago, The Guardian reported that 80% of emission effects were not real.
That's unfortunately most likely true.
Really?
So what happened actually is when the UN system broke down 12 years ago.
What happened, just so we know what happened 12 years ago?
What happened? Okay, unfortunately, the first so-called budget period of the Kyoto Protocol was 2008 to 2012. You still remember what happened 2008? Lehman Brothers, stock exchange crisis.
Yeah.
So we had a worldwide economic crisis, and it had measurable effect on the emissions.
Yeah.
Because the industrial production went down.
Okay.
And that meant that actually the emissions were reduced without doing anything.
Right.
So we were stuck with a system that was not flexible to keep the demand for the emission rights, because nobody had to do something. There was a slump in emissions. Russia, all the Eastern European states had like a third less emissions than before.
Okay.
Because of the end of communism.
Right.
So all that factors came into play to destroy the market demand for emission reductions. So the market broke down.
Yeah.
And at some point, the Europeans could not afford anymore to get their internal emission trading system watered down by the import of super cheap international emission rights. So in 2012, the European Community just said, enough is enough. No more import of emission rights into the European Community.
Okay.
Which led to the situation that inside the European Community, 1 ton of carbon reduction,
Yeah.
meanwhile got a value of up to $100.
Okay.
While outside the European community, you had some islands like in California where the state made their own emission trading system,
Yeah.
but there was no real demand for emission rights. So the last 10 years, many companies came up with this carbon neutral products.
Okay.
Or the airline offered you the possibility, click that button, pay $2 more, and your flight is carbon neutral.
I always feel guilty. I always click.
Yeah.
They made me feel guilty.
And it's so easy, and it's just a few dollars, yeah? But you need to know that actually you could buy a ton of emission rights for $5. And that didn't cover the cost.
Okay.
It's not so easy to reduce emissions. It costs more than $2 to $5 to do a real emission reduction.
What are we talking? What? Give me a number for. Say myself. What would be my cost? Do you think, as a normal person, to reduce a cost?
Well, the average Northern European American, roughly 10 tons of emissions per person.
Yeah.
So you would need to buy 10 tons of emission offset in order to be carbon neutral.
Okay.
The problem is you can afford that. The Americans can afford that. It wouldn't cut too much in our budget. But what is with the rest of the world?
Well, we're getting into big populations.
Yeah. The world has 8 billion guys. And in the moment, the Africans don't pollute a lot.
Okay.
But you could see on the example of China, within 30 years, their amount of emissions per capita came pretty close to what we have in Europe.
Right.
And they're 1.5 billions.
But how did... I'm one of the... I know now that probably 60-70% of my produce is from China. My clothing, my stuff I order at home, my technology.
A very good point. So now imagine the 60s.
Yeah.
Smokestacks were the symbol of prosperity.
Yeah.
More smoke means the economy is running well. And these guys were producing the steel, the cars, the rubber, the aluminium, all in Northern Europe, Northeast United States, the blue-collar workers.
Yeah.
Where are they? Do you have less cars in Europe than before? No. The metal comes from India.
It's moved.
Yeah, it moved. And all the goods produced, the clothes. We had huge pollution in Europe from the textile industry.
Right.
Now we have cleaned up rivers and we point the finger to China. Oh, the Chinese are so dirty, they pollute all the rivers. Oh, the Indians.
But we've more choice. I feel now that compared to the 60s, there must be... I can't even put the number on it, but the amount of a choice we have for clothing and textile, everything is...
Our pollution went to Southeast Asia. We are now importing the manufactured goods. We are adding some icing on the cake and sell it for double price. Fine, good business.
Yeah.
But the pollution is not here anymore. And all the steel workers and miners which went unemployed, it's not that nobody's using steel and coal anymore.
Yeah.
It's all in China.
So then, what I'm trying to say is then, how can I maintain my wants and needs as a consumer, but tell China to reduce?
That is a big, the $1 trillion question.
Yeah.
The European community actually enacted starting last October the so-called Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism.
Okay.
And that's a genius idea. And it's one of the reasons why things start moving now worldwide.
Okay.
It means if you import, for example, from China, a ton of steel, you have to show at the border how much carbon dioxide emissions did you cause with this ton of steel from China. And you will have to buy a European emission rights to compensate for that. And the compensation
Right.
shall be as high as inside Europe the industry would have to compensate. So there's no more advantage of moving your dirty production into a third world country,
Okay.
avoiding the European emission trading system, and then re-importing the stuff to Europe and make it look like carbon free. Nah, that doesn't work any longer. The system started last year.
Yeah.
So outside the expert community, people did not really realize it.
Yeah.
In the moment, it's cost-free. You only have to do reporting. It's a training phase.
Yeah.
But it will start with a few percent, and within 10 years, it will be 100%.
100%.
100%.
But does this not affect, though, China?
Yes, it would.
It's there.
Any steel, any cement, any chemical product,
Yeah.
any aluminium coming from China,
Yeah.
imported into Europe, will be covered by this system. So no more easy exit.
Okay.
So that's pretty fair. And that started also an interest in doing localized trading systems in China, in India, also here in this region,
Yeah.
that you comply, you mirror the European emission trading system, at least for the exported goods
Yeah.
to Europe,
Yeah.
and you get exempt from the European import carbon tax.
Ah.
And that moved a lot. It was a genius move by the European community. And the Chinese and the Americans and the Indians are all working on the same idea.
But, okay, so then it's for Europeans, but can China fight back if they wanted? Can China go, okay, well, you're making it difficult for us?
Yeah, 80% of their exports go either to United States or Europe.
Yeah.
They probably like to keep that market.
But if they decided to, because I remember during COVID, when, oh, not so COVID, do you remember that ship crashed into the Suez Canal and they couldn't get produce, and everyone kind of went, oh my days, that COVID and that ship, people realized how reliant they are on China.
Yeah, just in time, yeah.
Yeah.
The Chinese also depend on us.
Do they?
Oh, yes, of course. They can't live without international trade.
Yeah.
They're highly dependent on international trade.
But could they, for example, go, okay, well, you know what? Okay, Europe, we're going to focus on Africa. We're going to focus on South America. We're going to focus on the Middle East. We're going to focus on Russia. And I'm sure Australia will probably, because, you know.
Yeah, how many decades that would take to grow that markets into whatever they lost in Europe? Nah.
Not comparable, no.
That's not comparable, and the Chinese are clever enough not to do that.
Okay, they'll play ball.
Yeah, they can probably talk about it, but nah, they won't do that.
Yeah.
And anyhow, what not many people know, which country installed the most solar energy last year?
China?
Of course, China. Which country is leading producer of electric cars? Yeah, of course, China.
Yeah.
And you can make a long list like that.
Yeah.
Wind power, same, China. The latest designs of nuclear power stations, China. They're actually taking a lot of action.
They're in it for the long haul.
They are not as bad as they look like. The problem is structural. They have huge deposits of coal. They have regional development targets. So the fastest thing is, build another coal power station.
Yeah.
But they understood if they continue to pollute the environment in the way they're doing now, they're going to die.
Yeah.
This is impossible to live there anymore.
Yeah.
And there are satellite pictures where you can see a big gray cloud above China.
Really?
And it's so much that it actually helps to reduce greenhouse effect. It's like a permanent erupting volcano.
Really?
So
is it worse though? Like, because I don't know why. Is it worse than we think it is in China? Because I can't imagine China being so forthcoming and saying, here's all our information.
There is no more secrets. The latest generation of satellites can pretty much measure the carbon dioxide concentration, where the methane is coming from, the vegetation cover change. Space technology is so good for climate change because you see the whole planet. You can look from above into the most forbidden places and you can measure the shit they're producing there.
Yeah.
And you can put that on the UN convention and say, hey, you, Turkmenistan, you're having 5 open gas tubes.
So they know that. There's no more like
there's no way to hide that any longer. So what happened in China is their emissions from the coal power were so large that they actually reduced the global temperature by creating a reflecting cloud cover. When you clean that up, the temperatures will rise.
What does China say about it?
Oh, they know that.
No, but what do they say? And like, do they kind of go, so? Are they kind of like...
No, China had a good argumentation 20, 30 years ago. We are a developing country. Our population has the right to increase the industrial production.
Yeah.
And the majority of emissions in the air, anyhow, it's from the Brits, from the Americans, and from the Germans.
Yeah.
A little bit Russia. So we're just starting.
Yeah.
And we have the right to develop, the right to produce, the right to get rich too.
Yeah.
And they were, sure.
Yeah.
Of course.
Just because they relate to the party doesn't mean they could part.
But that changed the last 30 years enormously. So now it is like the emissions of China and the rest of the world.
Okay. What about India?
India's coming up, but let's say a second type of Chinese economic growth, the planet will not survive.
Really?
So when India goes the same developing path of China, we're done. And the Indians have a lot of coal under the ground.
Yeah. I was going to say, but we always hear... We hear of America did it, and we hear of European did it, and now we know China's doing it, but I feel like we kind of accept that China's doing it because we all want something from China or we have something from China. What is India's position? Are they up and coming, or are they admitting it, denying it, or are they making changes now? Or are they going to go like China did and say, it's now our turn?
Well, you have the same argumentation chain.
Yeah.
We did nothing before. We have populations that have the right to develop.
Yeah.
We want to have the freedom to do it with whatever we have, and what they got is coal in the ground.
Right.
But also one of the largest photovoltaic plants are set up in India. Okay. And in contrast to China, the environmental enthusiasm comes from the bottom.
Right.
It's the villagers which plant the trees. It's small communities which do solar and biogas reactors.
Yeah.
So it's not top down like in China. It's bottom up.
Interesting. Okay.
So I have actually a good feeling that the Indians will not follow the path of China.
Okay.
But we have to support that. We have to be watchful. We cannot afford a second China on this planet.
Are they, now that India's up and coming, are they now implementing the new technology that's available?
That is, of course, a big advantage. It's cheaper to set up a photovoltaic plant than the same capacity in coal.
Yeah.
30 years ago, you did not have that.
Right.
So that's already a big change.
Yeah.
The other change, of course, is, for example, this European carbon tax on imports. Who is the biggest producer internationally for steel outside China? India. And most of the large steel mills in Europe and USA are owned by Indians.
Right.
Not many people know, but it's actually an Indian industry.
Yeah.
So they are much more connected. They are much better informed than the Chinese 30 years ago.
Okay.
And Indians speak English.
Yeah.
There is many advantages. So it's possible to say, yes, India has a good chance to immediately move to a more carbon-reduced development path than China before.
Would that then, with them being like that, would that give them more goodwill with Europe and America? The fact that they're doing it now, as in China's kind of like has to move and adapt and doesn't really care. But if India, that was up and coming, did that now, they would have Europe and America kind of go, listen, we know you're trying, we get it.
I think Europeans and Americans are not doing enough.
Really,
Given the magnitude of the problem, we really should focus on fix China and prevent India from doing the same.
right?
And that will not help us in doing our homework.
Yeah,
So if we want to get to carbon neutrality by 2050,
yeah.
which is a theoretical target, actually we should do that even faster.
Can it be done faster, do you think?
With goodwill, of course.
But practicality.
There's practicalities. Let's say until 2 years ago, lots of coal power stations, gas turbines were built. They're brand new. They have capital value. If you tell them to shut down tomorrow, it's a loss.
Yeah.
So, where does the money come from? If you destroy this infrastructure assets, which were having a long technical life,
Yeah.
that money is gone, and you cannot tax them, and you cannot increase your GDP with them, and you cannot earn the money you can reinvest in saving the climate.
Right.
So a poor economy is not the solution for climate change. Actually, we need a lot of money, and our economies should run smoothly in order to create the amount of capital necessary to do all the infrastructure changes we need until 2050.
You said there that Europe's not doing enough and America. What can they do and what are they doing? In the sense of what can Europe do in the next 10 years? Realistically, can they do?
Fine. I'm German, so I stick with the German example because I know it best. So what happened in Germany is that the power production actually is very much in line of carbon neutrality by 2050.
Right.
It's even overperforming.
Okay.
That is smoothly. We had some restrictions for solar energy, which suddenly disappeared after tens of years of discussion. Now everybody can build solar power in their garden, on their house, without any restrictions anymore.
Okay.
Which is a good move.
Yeah.
The prices came down substantially.
What was sorry? I just thought. What was your restrictions? Why would there be restrictions on solar power before?
Yeah. Why would you should you be allowed to do something without having a license?
Yeah.
You are not allowed to touch the electricity without a master's diploma.
So that was the thinking behind it.
Oh yes.
Right.
Actually, in Germany, you're not supposed to touch anything connected with the electric grid is off limits. Yeah, don't touch it. Yeah, it's licensed master only. Could kill you.
In
could
Ireland,
kill somebody else.
everyone thinks they're an electrician.
Yeah. So now they realized to build a 2,000 watt photovoltaic array for a private household is putting the same strain on your electric system like a coffee machine.
Oh.
So why would you need a master?
Yeah.
Why would you need 5 stamps from the government in order to plug in a coffee maker? Same. So it's legal. Great. Everybody's doing it.
Right.
We should have done that 20 years ago. That's the only thing. Where it is much more difficult is traffic.
Okay.
So we started very late with electric cars, but we were now moving into electric cars and it suddenly stopped because the majority of Germans are living in apartments, parking the cars on the road or in the deep garage under the apartment.
Yeah.
And there's no plugs.
Yeah.
So these guys in the moment cannot have an electric car, even if they wanted to.
Right.
The electric cars were for the suburban upper middle class having a double garage.
Yeah.
There, fantastic. You
Charging station, no problem.
got a government subsidy for the solar array,
Yeah.
got a government subsidy for the charging station, got a government subsidy for the electric car. Now they're served. They all have electric cars, and the market discontinued
Yeah.
because there's no public infrastructure for all the cars parking on the roadside.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. So there's not a real solution in the moment for that.
I heard one suggestion for that was someone said, I think it was German actually, he said that they were able to convert, they had the technology, again, cost, was to convert street lamps into charging stations.
Fantastic. Yes, I get the license to do so.
But that's the problem. That was the problem.
And then again, how can you put your car in front of the light post
Yeah.
and your neighbor cannot?
Well, that was it.
This is not a solution for anything. It's a punctual solution for 100,000 guys, and what are doing the 20 million other guys?
But then what? So then what? Because it's not going to change. There's not going to be. There's still going to be street parking.
This is very, very difficult, let's say, and it shows you that it's maybe not the best idea to spend $30,000 on an electric car to save 2 tons per year.
Right.
So there's not a real good relationship between the invested amount of money and the savings.
Yeah. Yes.
So there's so many other things you can do with this gigantic amount of money, which would be much more beneficial for the climate. And now we're back to emissions trading.
Yes.
If I want, let's say, to make myself carbon neutral,
Yeah.
I have to buy an electric car for $30,000, which is ruined after 10 years.
Yeah.
I have to completely renovate my house, which probably before wasn't bad at all. So I have to throw out all the windows. I have to insulate the facade with styrofoam, which is also ecological questionable. And it will set me back, let's say, $100,000 to $200,000 in order to make myself carbon neutral.
Wow.
And we are talking about 10 tons a year. So what is better?
Yeah.
Give the money to somebody in Africa to plant trees or not to cut off the tree.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could do a whole forest instead of a single house. So what makes more sense? Of course, it makes more sense to do 10 times more with the same amount of money than taking care only about your own affair.
So as a person who lives here and who drives here and sits in traffic here and loves, what's the incentive? I know I should think of the future and the planet, which is, we all should, but how do you get a culture that's built on luxury of AC and luxury of swimming pools and luxury of nice cars and luxury of getting my food delivered and how do I...
2 years ago, I went by car through Nevada and California, and you come through the gold digger cities. And they used to be pretty busy 100 years ago.
Yeah.
And then suddenly everybody left.
Okay.
And these cities did not develop any longer, and now it's just a petrol station. Is there a reason, besides money, to be in Dubai? What would happen with Dubai if you take away all money? What happened during COVID? Guys from the subcontinent living here all their life packed up and left the country, never to come again.
Yeah.
Very quickly. The streets emptied.
So you think that Dubai is a bit of a gold miner town mentality?
Let's say that's what they have to be careful about,
right?
And that's what they have to avoid. And now comes the big chance from technology.
Yeah.
When all the oil is gone, the solar energy will remain.
Yeah.
This is one of the cheapest resources on the planet.
Which we
cheap,
get a lot of.
cheap solar energy.
Yeah.
And this is forever.
Yeah.
So what they have to develop is an economy based on the most efficient resource. They have experience in that. Oil, gas, that were resources that bubbled out of the ground,
Yeah.
and they built their economy up on that.
Yeah.
The next resource is solar. Cheap solar energy. And solar energy, of course, is cheaper here than in Siberia. They will always have an advantage. The Europeans will be never able to produce solar energy for themselves in Europe.
But why haven't they done it here then? You say that, but like offhands, and maybe industrial is solar, I've seen a few solar panels, but I wouldn't. In Dubai, I wouldn't go, this is a solar town.
You don't see it. And actually, that doesn't mean that it's not there. Because with all the dust, does it make sense to put solar arrays on the roof?
Well, that's what I was
You
gonna
need
say.
a monkey to clean that up every day.
Yeah.
Go out in the desert. The road nearby here, to the south,
Yeah.
it's an hour's drive.
Yeah.
The first thing you will see is a second sun. And that's the largest solar concentration plant on the planet.
Oh, well, there we go. I just got put in my place. So the largest solar planet is in Dubai.
Is in
an
Dubai.
An hour from home. Okay.
And actually, it should be a tourist attraction.
Yeah. Well, see, that's interesting because I never knew that. And
It's a gigantic light dome. And it looks like the eye of Sauron in the air, glowing.
How interesting.
And next to it is one of the largest photovoltaic arrays on the planet. And they're doing it really right. They put it in the flat desert.
Yeah.
There's enough space. And then every second day, a tractor runs by with a brush
Okay.
and just cleans it up. So don't bother with solar arrays on private properties. In the desert, it's so much cheaper than you ever can do it for yourself.
But so this goes back to my flip question. If I want to be, so in Europe, it's very difficult to become carbon neutral because if you do the conversion, but if you do it on the other side, here, it's almost not, is it not worth it?
Absolutely. You can have electric energy here, carbon neutral for 1 cent per kilowatt hour.
Uh-huh.
This is cheaper than natural gas from the ground.
Yeah.
And you can convert that electricity into hydrogen with very little losses. Actually, it's very efficient. Up to 90% of the electric energy can be converted into chemical energy already with the latest technology. If you do that, you have hydrogen, which is actually one of the most important chemical substances for the industry. You can make fuel out of it. You can make fertilizer out of it. So just to cover that demand will take out a huge percentage of the greenhouse gases produced now. So all the chemical industry based on natural gas can be replaced with hydrogen. You can even use the hydrogen for steel making. You can run ships with hydrogen in the form of ammonia. You can run engines, fuel cells with ammonia, liquid ammonia, and it's dense enough that it can run a ship with it around the planet. So this is all upcoming. The technologies are known. In the moment, we're a little bit stuck with the implementation.
Yeah.
Not because people don't want to buy. It's because you can't buy.
Yeah.
There's no producers.
Okay.
And even today, when you go to a bank and tell them, I want to build an ammonium plant, or I want to build a factory building fuel cells to make ammonia, the banker doesn't understand you.
Yeah.
You won't get the money.
Interesting.
So we are not stuck because of lack of technology, lack of ideas. We have all the ideas. We have the technology. We don't have the factories to produce the machines.
The machines that we need.
And that's a financial issue.
That is, I was going to say that. Then it goes back then.
It's only finance.
So
now we're back to emission trading.
Yeah, I was going to go, but this brings you back. So you're working now, again, with carbon credits.
Yeah.
Right. So what's changed?
So now you have a system where the UN again
Yeah.
is providing accountability.
Right.
You cannot just issue a emission right like monopoly money. There's rules. The minimum quality is set by the UN.
Still, I was going to say, so UN set these rules.
It's going through the UN system. The other new point is only emission rights that are issued by a national government are valid.
Okay.
And again, this is not just stamping. Every country has now a reduction target and a carbon neutrality target. They can be differ, but every nation sooner or later should get to zero.
And this includes the big boys, so China, USA, Saudi.
The nice thing is all big boys are included this time.
So they're all at the party.
No exemptions.
Yeah. Now, are they? Do they? I always feel like sometimes they go, yeah, sure, and then they give a wink. The other big boys, or do they? What's the consequences if they're not?
The consequence is if you don't start early, you get into a bad trajectory.
Yeah.
So you build up your infrastructure as a developing country in a way which is not carbon efficient, which causes carbon emission, which is energy intense, and then you're stuck with all the sunk capital.
No, but say, for example, like USA and Saudi, what's their incentive to do it?
Well, the US says, energy independence, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, you can drill, or you put a solar field on top. So what is easier? Actually, the solar is cheaper. I bet with you. It's just a culture which has to change.
They just feel like that they have to
and
work them in.
If that change of mind comes to a conclusion, the coal workers, the steel workers will understand, I get a job at the solar industry and they pay double salary. Guess how quickly they move away.
But how would you get the money for these projects? How do you get the money to these projects? So say, how do I get money into a project for solar power as opposed to drilling? How?
Good example, you don't get it for solar power anymore.
Oh.
Because guess when you make a economic analysis, produce electricity with a coal power station or produce electricity with solar power? Solar power is cheaper. Why you even consider a coal power station any longer? You shouldn't. Yeah. So this is again this what if. What is most likely development? And in the moment, if I need more electric power, I build a photovoltaic plant. Easy, no-brainer. So you don't get emission rights for large-scale photovoltaics any longer.
Oh, okay.
You have to come up with something more difficult.
I was just going to think
it's too easy.
Yeah, it's too easy. It sounds like it's too easy.
Yeah. So I would say the electricity sector is taken care of.
Yeah.
We need some electric storage technology which can be improved.
Yeah.
We need lots of capacity power to liquids to store long-term energy.
Okay.
But if that is done, the electricity problem is solved. You add a few nuclear power plants where it's too cold and where you don't have the solar. Done. That's it. Done. There's a plan, yeah.
Interesting.
Easy.
But that's what I was going to sound. It almost sounds... It sounds too easy.
It is unbelievable easy because photovoltaics got so cheap.
Right.
You can't do much wrong with 1 cent per kilowatt hour.
Right.
Just brush the sand off.
You just need a brush. That's going to be my invention. I'm going to make an invention of a brush, and I'm going to make my... That's it. Watch this space now. You heard it first.
So we have to look into reduction of electricity consumption. We have to look into transportation, into infrastructure, lifestyle, and also food production. Right. That is much more difficult and complicated than the big electricity production, which is now causing most of the emissions.
And again, I know I keep going back to it, but how do you change the consumption? We're in a world now where, especially in where we are now in Dubai, I, at my fingertips, have anything and everything I want.
Yeah, okay. Let's look into automobile.
Yeah.
The most visible object you have to show off, yeah?
Yeah.
Lamborghini. But starting, you see the most expensive electric cars running around in Dubai, and there's the super sports cars.
Yeah.
The latest Audis,
Yeah.
the latest Teslas.
Yeah.
Plenty. It got fashionable to be electric.
Yeah.
Now, the next thing I want to see that it's fashionable to have an energy efficient house.
Okay.
So things can change.
It can change. It just takes that push.
And that can be forerunners. The first electric cars were pretty expensive one.
Yeah.
So actually the luxury cars financed the development of the normal electric cars.
Yeah.
That's okay.
I think here for electric cars is much more, you know, you go to the mall, you can charge your car, buildings have it. I think here they kind of incorporated it without thinking a little bit more.
It's a little bit early because still most of the electric power comes from natural gas.
Okay.
But in the moment, the majority of the electricity is done by solar, and it should be, because that is the cheapest way to do electricity.
Yeah.
Then electric cars make perfect sense.
Do you think that like we were saying before, the electric car market, the problem is that Europe is kind of stuck because they can't.
Europe is stuck with the infrastructure.
Yeah.
Here, you have a new city every 2 years.
Yeah.
The city expands 10%, and it's easy to implement something new. All the garages in Dubai now have electric sockets.
Yeah.
So it's easy for them to change that.
But not Europe. So do you think but because of that, because the demand in Europe and in America, because the infrastructure isn't there yet, then the demand will drop off, and then people's interest will drop off? Is it a snowball?
It's more difficult in Europe. You have higher costs for electricity generation, naturally. There's no way around that. And you have higher costs to upgrade the infrastructure. So that is, both things are playing against Europe. And as a European, I must say, well, the only way how to compete is we must be faster. We must have better technology. And yeah, sorry guys.
Yeah.
That's not fast enough in the moment.
What can we do with SAO carbon credit? What can we do with it?
Okay. When you create a carbon credit in Dubai, let's say, you have to go to the UAE government.
Okay.
You have to register your project.
All right.
And the government has to decide to award your project with the issuance of a international transferable emission right.
Okay.
Once you have that, you can take it with you, for example, to Europe.
Yeah.
And in Europe, it will be added to the national budget of that European country.
Okay.
Switzerland is doing that, for example. They are forerunners. In Switzerland, they want to reach carbon neutrality in the transportation sector.
Right.
And the transportation sectors, petrol companies, made a fund, and the fund is buying this specific international valuable emission rights from 50 different countries.
Okay.
They do that on purpose. It's a pilot. And they reach carbon neutrality in the way that the emission rights are transferred to Switzerland. And in Switzerland, these emission rights are destroyed. So nobody can use them anymore.
Okay.
So there's no double accounting.
Right. How long, has this been implemented for? How long has this been?
We are in the second year.
Oh.
This is brand new.
Brand new.
Yes. And it's still experimental, let's say. Most of these transactions are the first transaction a country ever is doing under the new system. So anybody doing it now is still at the very beginning.
So they don't know, they haven't noticed the impact yet, or has it been noticed?
I would say the countries in Africa are much more aware of that.
Yeah.
For them, it's huge money. The EU Europeans are very reluctant.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to repeat the mistakes done in 2012.
Right.
They don't want to buy into a market is potentially much cheaper than their own emission reductions.
Yeah.
I hope the European market will be opened for the international exchangeable emission rights,
Okay.
traded under the UN system. But that means that the prices in the UN system need to be higher than now.
Right.
So I hope that the price from $20 will go more into the direction of $60 to match the European system, and then the systems become interchangeable.
How can I reduce emissions? How can we do it?
So we're here talking about water-related technologies.
Yeah.
Water treatment.
Yeah.
Big consumer of electricity.
Yeah.
And the latest technology can reduce electricity consumption of sewage treatment from 30 to 50%.
Okay.
And it's a lot. We're not talking about small figures. Each project makes a huge impact. We're talking about thousands of tons of carbon emissions each year.
Why should the buyer believe you?
Because it's easy measurable.
Okay.
The big advantage is you're running the electricity through an electric meter, and that is very accurate. It's easy to prove that you're using less energy than before.
Is it difficult to cheat?
You're going through several layers of verification.
Okay.
First, you have to convince the host country government. They have to give up emission rights, which they need to take from somewhere else. Secondly, you have to convince the verifier, who has to lose a good name, that you don't cheat.
Okay.
You have to show all the documents, you have to show the equipment, it's working. So even you would be able to see it from a satellite picture. So
okay.
It's bubbling. It's easy to control. Thirdly, you have to convince the buyer. The buyers are burned with all the monopoly money in circulation now. So they want also to be sure you're doing the right thing, because if later it would appear that you bought emission rights which were fraudulent, they might not be valuable anymore.
Okay.
So you have several layers of control and people which are interested in making sure that you're doing the right thing.
Okay. You seem excited about it all.
I am now super excited. This is a fresh beginning. It's better than ever. And I believe there's a great future in this new UN system called Paris Agreement.
Okay. So that's what we should keep our hopes up for. Tobias, I really appreciate your time. I could talk to you all day about this. It's fascinating, but I know you're a very busy man. But hopefully we'll talk again. Yes?
Thank you very much. See you soon.
Expect performance.